Morning Blues for Wednesday the 12th of February 2025. Hope you're doing really well. I'm Daniel Childs, wherever you're watching or listening to this. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. The pressure or lack of pressure growing on the shoulders of Enzo Maresca from the Chelsea board. We'll also look at some of the debates and discussions that have been going on about Chelsea's ownership online that I do have a bit to say about. Chelsea have signed a new centre forward. Is it the one we want? And also some stuff around Chelsea's style of play and how problematic it is. We've also got a Delap update at the end of this show too. So I want to pack in quite a bit in today's show. Please do like, subscribe, really helps the show out. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Share the show around if you're enjoying it. If you're listening on the podcast feed, which I know quite a few of you are, please do give us the time of a positive rate and review. Really helps the show out and get it to more ears and eyes, especially on YouTube as well. So let's jump in with Maresca. So there's been reports in recent days from Simon Johnson that there's been no suggestion that Chelsea's hierarchy are disappointed with what they have seen from Enzo Maresca. Simon Johnson goes on to explain that because Maresca was backed with a 5-year deal, the complication of the FIFA Club World Cup taking place in mid-June, July, and this feels like a Clear Lake-ism, this bringing in new words and new phrases that we haven't talked about before, but this was viewed from the outset as a two-season season. Fraser Fletcher, and this is one of the things I referenced in my opening there has been no suggestion, and he sort of quote tweeted the thing from Chelsea Dodgers about Simon Johnson, this report of Maresca not being under pressure, and he just put, there has been no suggestion that Chelsea's hierarchy are disappointed with what they have seen from Graham Potter, and then he scratches that out. Mauricio Pochettino scratches that out, and of course Enzo Maresca. So I guess some people understand the Groundhog Day nature of this, the repetitive nature of this. These are things we heard very similar feels and vibes around Pochettino when things were struggling last season, and also of course Graham Potter. I think Graham Potter's more applicable here because the relationship between Chelsea's ownership and Graham Potter, I think, or kind of the way that project was sold is a lot more similar to Maresca than Pochettino. Pochettino was given a much shorter contract. It always felt maybe like a marriage of convenience, especially the way it ended. But we can say our piece about Maresca a lot. I mean, I'll ask you in the comments. I'm a firm believer that, I don't think sacking Enzo Maresca, if the current strategy and mindset of Clear Lake remains the same, is going to do much. However, and I think it is a big however, I also am not a big believer that means that Maresca can just continue to fail and struggle and he faces no accountability for it. I guess in terms of relevance, in terms of what does that mean in terms of the current Chelsea, obviously that in itself is an issue. But I am a believer that I think if he fails to get Champions League football, I don't really see the point of him keeping his job, because this season was all about getting Champions League football. Now, let me make it abundantly clear. If Enzo Maresca loses his job, the people above him should lose their job as well. Like that should be quite obvious. That should go without saying, to be honest, because sporting directors would have overseen Potter, Pochettino and Maresca failing within a period of 3 years, not even that. So that is undeniably true and should be accurate, and there should be accountability. But as we spoke about on Monday's Morning Blues, there is very little accountability at Chelsea. And cynically, I think that Maresca's not under that much pressure, because he's kind of said this before, that there's no expectation on him to do much this season, really. I mean, he's basically publicly said that. He said that quite casually. Whether he was supposed to say that or not, I don't know, but he said it before the Man City game to Sky Sports a few weeks ago. And I kind of think that he's doing what probably the ownership want, right? He's a pretty safe, technocratic coach who plays modern football, whatever we could deem that to be, and he doesn't really challenge things in press conferences, and probably behind the scenes he's a lot calmer than maybe Pochettino. He's not going to give you the confrontational vibe and kind of just stance that I think a lot more serious coaches would give. I think Expected Chelsea did a great thread around this. Like, the issue Chelsea have currently got is that we are going to be stuck with a level of coach like Enzo Maresca, hoping that you uncover a brilliant future coach rather than actually serious elite coaches right now, because serious elite coaches probably don't want to go anywhere near Chelsea because of the chaos that's been seen, but also because if the starting premise is not we're going to give you, this is a ruthless environment that's about winning the biggest titles. You can understand why an elite coach, someone who wants to get to that level, or maybe who has been at that level before, wants to walk into that environment, because I'm always going to have one or two hands tied behind my back. That in itself is an issue. Tom Overend, I know a lot of you probably follow him on X. He was saying, and I responded to this, but I'll give some more thoughts here. He said, lots of people are saying Clear Lake are not interested in improving the team because the club is making them profit. This is not true. And then he references that last year's accounts saw an 166 million loss, and there is a clear financial incentive to get Champions League, big broadcast money, around £40 million, and commercial deals. Now, I agree that there is obviously a massive financial incentive. I just don't agree with the premise that it is about getting us into the Champions League. It's about the things that fans care about, and it's just objective, like getting Chelsea into more serious places and in a quicker time. I just don't buy that, because we've walked out of 2 transfer windows looking weaker. Now, it's either one or two things. Either the sporting directors are so incompetent that they don't understand what a weaker squad looks like, which is a possibility. Like, even my second possibility is still about incompetence. It's incompetence. It's extreme incompetence and kind of less incompetence, but we're still going to end up with incompetence on these two options. So I'll hear your thoughts in the comments below. So there's that one, that the ownership does want us to be competitive, but the sporting directors are so consistently incompetent in the transfer window to build that squad, which then ponders, why are they still in the job then? If the ownership, if Benedict Barley above them is so much more ruthless and so much more ambitious, why are those people still in the job? That's one question. I think logically it doesn't make a lot of sense, and the fact that they aren't under any performance review, I think, tells you a lot. The second one is, it isn't about making a better squad, and they are very much fulfilling what Clear Lake want. And I think that's been only proven in recent days with the new signing of another centre forward, Dastan Satpev from Karat Almaty. Only cost €4 million. Very similar type of signing, your David Washington type signings, arguably even your Mark Guiu, but Mark Guiu at least played some football for the first team. And these are the type of signings that Chelsea continue to do, and I think at the end of the day are really prioritising. Now, where does this player end up in the future? Does he end up a first team player for Chelsea? Does he end up like a Mark Guiu in the sense that he's a rotational option that is going to be flipped for profit? Is he going to be loaned to Strasbourg? Is he going to have to be loaned out somewhere else? And in Chelsea, like a David Washington, he gets put in our academy and development squad for a couple of years and then he has to move elsewhere. Is it going to be another Cesare Casadei? We have seen lots of these stories. There's barely been any story so far that has seen Chelsea uncover a brilliant talent. They walk into the first team and become a massive success. That is something that's undeniable. And what I mean by that is someone who's really unknown, like barely has any football. Cole Palmer, you could argue, but Cole Palmer at least had played Premier League and Champions League football for Man City. People knew who Cole Palmer was. I'm talking about players who are really on the fringes, who've barely made any senior minutes so far. I guess the argument you could make if you're of a more patient mind is you could argue that Esteval Willian and Andre Santos and Kendry Paez are the three that you could argue are coming over the horizon, hopefully, to kind of vindicate this policy. So that is something we will see next season. However, I think for now, people, of course, are very riled up and are frustrated when they see another very young, very raw player who is not going to solve our problems being signed. And is this actually what the club want to do? It's about player trading. It's about bringing in these players, flipping them for profit, not about actually spending vast amounts on what's going to improve the first team right now to get us better and to make us more money to be more successful. That is kind of my consistent contention. I just feel that people are clinging on to this belief that they have to believe what I believe, because if I don't believe that they want us to succeed, then it becomes a very negative mindset, right? And I understand why people maybe fear about admitting that or wanting to believe that. I just am personally of the belief that after a while, evidence and actions mean a lot more than briefs and words. They just do. If I watch a squad consistently get weaker and more boneheaded football decisions get made, at some point, it doesn't matter what I'm being told or being briefed. I have to look at the actions, and those are more, that's the reality. That's what you have to contend with more. And I just think on the scale, the reality is telling me something, and I think more and more people are waking up to it. I also want to talk a little bit about Liam Delap. So The latest update from Simon Phillips is that Chelsea apparently held talks over signing Delap before January. The report is basically saying that maybe Chelsea could sign Delap before the Club World Cup. Here, the Club World Cup coming up again because, of course, it starts in mid-June. The season ends at the end of May. And so there's a bit of time there, and because the transfer window opens at the beginning of June, you've got this unique situation where it's kind of also unknown whether, like, Esteval, for instance, could play against Chelsea. What would happen with certain players. It's a little bit like that COVID period, if you remember, where you're not sure when a player can start playing for you, even if you've signed them, and you know, in terms of the scale and the schedule. But I think that in terms of Delap, I'm still a believer that I think there's a high percentage chance Chelsea will sign Liam Delap. And I think the main reason, it's not because of what he's done in the Premier League. I firmly believe the reason he signs is because of his previous connection to Manchester City. You look at who we've consistently signed: Tosin Adarabioyo, Romeo Lavia, Cole Palmer. I'm probably missing someone out there, obvious. But, you know, we've consistently signed players that have had some previous connection to Man City's academy. So I can see it happening. But Delap, objectively, I think would have been a good signing in January. I think he's had a really impressive season in the Premier League, given he's probably playing for a team that are very, very likely going down. I can't see Ipswich staying up. So then the possibility of that deal happening between the end of the season and June the 15th or when the Club World Cup starts, I could see happening, to be honest. I could see there being some progress made, and I could see Chelsea signing that player. And I don't think, just in isolation, that is a bad addition. That doesn't mean all our problems are solved, but I think that the based on what I've seen in the Premier League, he's proven to be quite a decent player, and I wonder if he could be a player that gets actually significantly better around better players at Chelsea. So that's something at least to be a little bit excited about, is that Delap could be joining, but we'll have to see and how that fits into the Club World Cup and where Chelsea sit between now and May. Things could change very radically. And there could be more chaos at Stamford Bridge between now and then. Like, you cannot put it past this current ownership of Chelsea to not sack Enzo Maresca at the end of the season and try and have a new coach in there before the Club World Cup. You just can't. How can anyone tell me that that's not a possibility? Like, it just is. You have to put everything on the table with Clear Lake Chelsea. The very final thing I want to speak about before I get out of here today is someone sent me this graph, and the graph was really mainly focusing on Tottenham under Ange Postecoglou and all the problems they have. And it looks at which teams sprint more in possession versus out of possession this season. Now, sprinting is not the only metric you use to decipher whether a team is good or bad. Obviously, this is one metric out of many you use to assess a team. But I think it is quite revealing. Tottenham are comically... So there's four sections, right? And comically, Spurs are in the top right in terms of high intensity in possession and high intensity out of possession. That kind of sums up the Postecoglou style of play and why things are, I think, in many ways look so comical. There is that there isn't much balance, there isn't much nuance to his style of play, and he's been found out consistently. Of course, along with a load of injuries, that intensity has probably not helped his players this season. And there's a group of obviously Premier League clubs here. Man City are another extreme in terms of low intensity in possession but high intensity out of possession. Chelsea find themselves in kind of the worst place. There isn't really a balance here. Chelsea are kind of the most extreme, close to 8.5 on this graph, of low intensity in possession and low intensity out of possession. That I don't think is a good metric. Especially when you compare it to teams like Newcastle, you compare it to teams even like Arsenal. I found it interesting looking at Nottingham Forest, who are high intensity in possession, low intensity out of possession. Chelsea have kind of got the worst of both worlds here, is that we kind of see this slow, repetitive nature of passing, especially more so in recent months as our form has deteriorated really. And also out of possession, that has been a problem consistently defensively. Our intensity out of possession has been something that people have flagged pretty much since pre-season. How easy it is for teams to get into dangerous areas against Chelsea. We've looked at this on the show before in kind of more specific ways. Our offside line issue at the edge of the box, I spoke about that months ago. That has been a consistent problem. But also just this passive nature of Chelsea. We see it consistently within games. We saw it on Saturday. Chelsea start a game quite well, but that intensity fades very rapidly and Chelsea get exposed. This is something that kind of, I think, reflects the issue that Chelsea have currently under Enzo Maresca, is this belief that a style of play, just an idea, a principle style of play is going to get you so far down the line without actually factoring in several intangibles in terms of players' work rate, in terms of players' physicality, in terms of the composition of your squad that has that physicality to be able to work and be effective in the Premier League. And I just feel that it's also just a style of play that doesn't connect easily with Chelsea fans. I don't think it connects well with English football fans, if I'm being honest. I think the reason that Man City, for instance, were successful under Pep Guardiola, yes, there are freakish things within Guardiola, right? He is one of the best footballing minds we've ever seen, one of the best coaches we've ever seen, and he has had the privilege throughout his career, but especially at Man City, to have great players. I was listening to a podcast, actually a wrestling podcast, weirdly, and a line struck with me, and it was someone analysing like why wrestling shows and why, you know, people who make wrestling shows and kind of why they're successful versus others. And at the end of the day, it comes down to, and the analogy that was being made was looking at American football, but it applies to football here, is that you can talk about tactics, you can talk about strategy all you want, but the reason that team did better than someone else, the reason why when you think back to the greatest teams that you've seen, they had the players. And that undeniably, I think, gets back to a core issue with Chelsea at the moment, is that tactics can get you a certain way. I'm not saying that tactics are relevant. I'm not doing a Souness here and saying that tactics don't matter in the modern game. Of course they do. It'd be naive, and I just think it'd be stupid to just try and argue that tactics have no place in the game, or kind of they haven't grown in significance. Data hasn't grown in significance. We're literally looking at a graph here that shows us quite intricate data over the Premier League. Obviously, I'm interested in that stuff. I think you're interested in that stuff. But at the end of the day, Chelsea were successful. Our best teams were successful because we had brilliant players. Because at the end of the day, we had JT, we had Petr Cech, we had Didier Drogba, we had Frank Lampard, we had Eden Hazard, we had Diego Costa, we had Cesc Fabregas, we had Nemanja Matic. We had players who it didn't really matter at the end of the day, because 9 times out of 10, when you've got Eden Hazard at his best, when you've got Diego Costa in his prime, they will get you over the line because they are world-class players. And I think that when you spent the money Chelsea have and you don't have enough of those players, you see Cole Palmer right at his best. He is proof of that. That's where people get frustrated. And I think that at the end of the day, that is a simplistic thing we need to get back to. But I think it's just an undeniable thing of, I don't think Man City succeeded purely because they play a style of football. I think they succeed because they have great players and they have the finances to get the best players more so than everyone else. And they were able to put those players out more than everyone else. And that's why they win more games of football. It is, in some ways, because football has been intellectualized in so many ways, we've gone round in a circle back to kind of a very simple truth. But I think it is a simple truth. And I think it's something that sticks throughout history. And I think that it's something that is maybe a little bit, it is just simplistic at the end of the day. It is probably, we want kind of this mythical answer, right? I think people want to believe that coaches are kind of like these gods, right? That could come down with these outstanding principles and outstanding tactics and can revolutionize your team. But at the end of the day, as Maresca is finding out right now, if you have sufficient flaws, not only within your first team, but within your squad, there's only so much you can do. If you've got a goalkeeper that decides to run out of his goal at stupid moments, it does not matter what your principles and what your tactical philosophy is. You've just got flawed players who are going to cost you 9 times out of 10. If you have better players like a Cole Palmer, they can help you and actually supersede whatever kind of your complex tactics are, because they are just amazing. So I want to hear your thoughts. I mean, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you fundamentally disagree with me? I think that Chelsea it's the same with Liverpool, right? Arne Slot has some brilliant players, brilliant individuals. Mohamed Salah is one of the best performing players in world football right now. He has been for a long period of time. If Liverpool do not have Mohamed Salah, their style of play looks radically different and it looks much poorer, because Salah is a genius. And I'm not saying that uncovering those players is easy, is simple, but I think it should give you a lesson that if you want to compete at the highest level, which we're consistently told this ownership does, but we spoke about this earlier. We spoke about this a lot, whether that actually is the case. But if you want to get back to the top level, you have to compete and buy the best players. It's not that hard. It's not that difficult. but I think that it's something that has been lost in recent Chelsea discussion and discourse, and especially at the serious decision-making level at Chelsea. Will we get back to that? I'm not entirely sure, but those are my thoughts, and please let me know yours in the comments below. Follow me across the socials. I'll be back for my team selected tomorrow, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.